Hello and welcome. You're watching NDTV World. I am Aditi Bhardwaj and a lot is we are tracking on this hour. So stay tuned and keep watching. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. US Vice President Kamala Harris held her first presidential rally in Wisconsin. Harris launched a scathing attack on her rival Donald Trump, calling citizens of US to choose between chaos and freedom. Reuters polls show Kamala gaining ground against Trump. US Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheatle has resigned from her job following the assassination attempt against former President Donald Trump. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in Washington to address the US Congress. Israeli PM is also likely to meet US President Joe Biden, who is battling COVID-19. Meta releases a new artificial intelligence model. It says rivals technologies from OpenAI and Google and is making it free for anyone to use. In her seventh record union budget, Indian Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman announced key employment schemes and also revised the tax structure in the new tax regime. While the slabs in old regime remain unchanged, Modi government's focus remains on job creation and rural development. In the first high-level visit by the newly elected Labour government in the United Kingdom, UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy will arrive this morning for a day-long visit in India, where a full reset of ties and economic, domestic and global security will be at the top of the agenda. Now, US Vice President Kamala Harris assailed Donald Trump at her first campaign rally since replacing President Joe Biden as the Democratic presidential candidate, while an opinion poll showed her taking a marginal lead over her Republican rival. In a 17-minute speech, Harris aggressively went after Trump's vulnerabilities, comparing her background as a former prosecutor to his record as a convicted felon. Harris ticked through a list of liberal priorities, saying that if elected, she would act to expand abortion access, make it easier for workers to join unions and address gun violence, drawing a sharp contrast with Trump, the Republican nominee for president in the November 5 elections. And as per a recent poll done by Reuters Ipsos, the opinion poll has said that Vice President Kamala Harris has opened up a marginal 2 percentage point lead over Republican Donald Trump. This indicates that Harris is experiencing a boost in support, likely due to the recent media coverage surrounding her candidacy and Biden's endorsement.
Donald Trump was just found guilty of fraud on 34 counts. But let's also make no mistake, this campaign is not just about us versus Donald Trump. This campaign is about who we fight for. This is about who we fight for. Just look at how we are running our campaigns. So Donald Trump is relying on support from billionaires and big corporations. And he is trading access in exchange for campaign contributions.
The US has seen a whirlwind few days, which has thrown Vice President Kamala Harris in the spotlight after US President Joe Biden quit the elections race and passed on the torch, the first sitting president to do so in over 50 years. Harris is now all set to begin a 100-day sprint to the November election. When it comes to key issues such as abortion, immigration and more, the Harris campaign is likely to have a different view. Let's take a look. On abortion, while both Biden and Harris support the right to abortion, Harris is likely to push for a nationwide right to abortion, which will limit the state's powers to impose restriction, whereas Biden had vowed to restore Roe v. Wade, but allow states to limit access to abortion. Looking at immigration, While Harris has focused on addressing the root causes of illegal immigration, such as poverty, violence, corruption, and more, this is something that is likely to continue in her campaign. Biden has had a much harsher stance on immigration, restricting asylum claims on the border and expediting deportations of illegal migrants. Looking at the conflicts, especially the war in Gaza, Biden's outspoken support for Israel in the war in Gaza and his decision to keep supplying the Netanyahu government with military aid has provoked outrage across the US during his re-election campaign. While Harris has not indeed broken away from Biden on the matter, she has expressed more public sympathy towards Palestinians and was in fact one of the first senior officials to call for an immediate temporary ceasefire in the war, calling the conflict a humanitarian catastrophe. On trade, while both Biden and Harris have similar positions on trade, Harris could divert from Biden's tariff policies, which have preserved Trump's duties on consumer goods and raised tariffs on clean energy tech. However, she is as trade skeptical as Biden. Case in point, opposing the US-Mexico-Canada agreement when she was in Senate. Interestingly, on AI is where Biden and Harris's policies diverge, with Harris supporting government regulations in AI while Biden having sought to govern AI companies largely through voluntary standard setting. With Kamala all set to win the Democrat nomination next month, it will be interesting to see how her differing take on issues will impact her campaign. Disha Bagchi for NDTV.
Now, to discuss more about the prospects of Kamala Harris, I'm being joined by two very renowned guests, Harini Krishnan, who's a National Co-Director of South Asians for Harris from California, and also being joined by Neha Diwan, who's also the National Co-Director of South Asians for Harris from New York. Well, thank you and good morning from India to both of you. Let's start with Harini, you first. What do you think about this highly energized rally that Kamala Harris had? Wisconsin voted for Biden 4 years ago. Will they keep up their loyalties?
First of all, thank you for having us. Incredibly grateful for the opportunity. I will say that, my comments are going to be informed not just as one of the national co-directors of South Asians for Harris, but as a friend of VP Harris for a long time. I was fortunate to be a lead volunteer organizer in her presidential campaign in 2019 in California. I've been with her a long time. I know the phenomenal leader that she is. And the answer to your question is, you saw the electric energy on the ground in Wisconsin. It mirrored the energy that was on the ground for Obama in 2008. Biden won Wisconsin by some 20,000 votes. And I was fortunate to be part of the grassroots organizing effort led by South Asians for Biden, which was chaired by my phenomenal co-host here, Neha Diwan. And we made calls to 25,000 South Asian, Indian American, Bangladeshi, Sri Lankan American voters. And that was the margin of victory. So I think in terms of the energy, there is unprecedented momentum and excitement and energy that was not there a couple of weeks ago because of President Biden's historic decision to put the country first and endorsing VP Kamala Harris. There's excitement across communities. It is not just within one community. It is in the base of the Democratic Party, which is Black voters. It is in the Indian American, and it is in the South Asian community. Neha and my phones have been blowing up over the last 48 hours with 300 text messages from people saying, how do we get involved? What can we do to support? This is a historic opportunity for us to elect the first president, the first woman president, the first Indian American president, and there is unprecedented momentum. And you saw that today in Wisconsin, in the rally and in her remarks. And you also see the contrast, right? She's a prosecutor versus Trump, who is a convicted felon. You see the contrast. She knows how to prosecute the case against Trump. Trump spent his entire presidency demonizing immigrants that look like me and Neha, with his xenophobic rhetoric. And there's a contrast, right? There's somebody who truly represents immigrants who form the base of the United States. So there's a lot of excitement.
Right, Harini, taking your point forward that the Indian community does give a big shout out to Kamala Harris. Let me ask this question to Neha now. Neha, what do you think? Does Harris enjoy strong support within her party? Will she be the confirmed Democratic nominee, or will we see a twist?
No, absolutely. Thank you again for having us as well. Yes, I mean, she's absolutely going to be the nominee of the party. She has secured enough delegates that make her the nominee. Also, we haven't seen anybody really that wants to challenge her because, she is a very strong candidate. She's very well accepted within the Democratic Party. Within 48 hours, we have leaders and, ex-presidents and, folks within the party just endorsing her. So it's a matter of just, getting on the road and, moving. But there's a lot of enthusiasm, as Harini has mentioned, in ways that we just have not seen in a very long time. Last week we had the Republican National Convention, and there was a lot of talk about, perhaps the second lady with Usha Vance, and with Kamala Harris being at the top of the ticket. I mean, that has just incredibly energized people who were, thinking about voting Republican, just very, very proud. And not only that, but just for the policies and what she could also mean for the next generation, for the young generation, for our community. 10 years ago, who would have thought that this is where we would be? An Indian American, child of an immigrant, at the top of a ticket, and very possibly the next president of the United States. So very, very exciting times for us. And, along with Harini, I have two daughters, and I'm very excited for what this means for them. I've taught my 5-year-old to say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she says president. And this is going to happen. She is going to set that precedent. So we're very, very excited.
Right, Neha. Well, you said, and the recent polls are also showing that Kamala Harris is gaining ground against Donald Trump. But Harini, if I ask this to you, while polls reflect growing popularity of Kamala Harris, Trump's campaign has downplayed the significance of Harris's lead, attributing it to just a temporary media attention after Joe Biden endorsed her.
So I'm just going to put it out there. Trump is going to say whatever he can to try to diminish the excitement that is on the ground right here in the United States right now. You have libertarians, you have independents that are saying we are going to vote for Kamala Harris. Something that I want to say is, the people often talk about the Indian American community, like the tech community supporting Trump. I don't know if you saw this, but over the course of the last day, I've been watching this interchange between Vinod Khosla and Elon Musk on Twitter. And Elon Musk called out Trump. He said, I don't care, I don't care what you do to my tax bracket. But what I care about is the fact that you demonized people who look like me. You demonized, who came to this country for the American dream. And right. You are talking about putting immigrants in a cage fight. You're talking about restricting our daughters, our women's fundamental reproductive freedoms. You're talking about taking us back to the 18th century. And, in an interview, take him at his own words, he talked about suspending political liberties on day one and becoming a dictator.
Right.
So, Indian American community members, they know Trump can say whatever he wants because he's very good at spinning that.
Harini and Neha, I get your point, and this remains to be seen how Kamala Harris will match up to Donald Trump, as the recent reports are also saying, that she's gaining ground. Well, thank you so much, Neha and Harini, for joining us for a detailed discussion.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Now, shifting our focus to another big story, U.S. Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheatle has resigned from her job following the assassination attempt against former President Donald Trump that unleashed intensifying outcry about how the agency tasked with protecting current and former presidents could fail in its core mission. Kimberly Cheatle, who had served as Secret Service Director since August 2022, had been facing growing calls to resign and several investigations into how the shooter was able to get so close to the Republican presidential nominee at an outdoor campaign rally in Pennsylvania. U.S. President Joe Biden thanked Kimberly Cheatle for her service and informed that a new director will be appointed soon. Now, shifting our focus to what's happening in India, India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has presented her coalition government's first budget. The budget announcements clearly indicate a shift in priorities for Prime Minister Narendra Modi's new dispensation, with ramped-up allocations for rural development, skilling, jobs and agriculture. The budget increased tax on long-term capital gains on all financial and non-financial assets to 12.5% from 10%. Short-term capital gains will now be taxed at 20% instead of 15%. The budget has also increased the security transaction tax on derivatives trading. Now, top corporate voices have hailed the budget as a positive indicator on economic growth and development. Sample the reactions coming in.
In the new tax regime, the tax rate structure is proposed to be revised as follows. 0 to 3 lakh rupees, nil. 3 to 7 lakh rupees, 5%. 7 to 10 lakh rupees, 10%. 10 to 12 lakh rupees, 15%. 12 to 15 lakh rupees, 20%. And above 15 lakh rupees, 30%. As a result of these changes, a salaried employee in the new tax regime stands to save up to 17,500 rupees in income tax.
Now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in Washington to address the U.S. Congress. Mr. Netanyahu was invited by Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson to give his first address to Congress in 9 years. Israeli Prime Minister is also likely to meet U.S. President Joe Biden, who is battling COVID-19. This would be his fourth address to the U.S. Congress, the most ever by any other leader. Now, before stepping on the plane on Monday, Netanyahu said he would emphasize the theme of Israel's bipartisanship in his speech and said Israel would remain a key U.S. ally in the Middle East regardless who the American people choose as their next president. Here is our report. Take a look.
Amid the historical political turmoil in the United States, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has landed in Washington and is scheduled to address a joint session of Congress to make a speech emphasizing Israel's bipartisanship at a time of great uncertainty following Biden's withdrawal from the presidential race. Before boarding his plane to Washington, Netanyahu also stressed that Israel would remain a key ally to the United States regardless of who the American people choose as their next leader in the upcoming elections.
I will address for the fourth time both houses of Congress as the Prime Minister of Israel. I will seek to anchor the bipartisan support that is so important for Israel, and I will tell my friends on both sides of the aisle that regardless who the American people choose as their next president, Israel remains America's indispensable and strong ally in the Middle East.
Considering the dissatisfaction from both Israeli and American nationals on how the Israel-Gaza war has been handled, Netanyahu's visit to the White House is especially crucial to the prospects of a ceasefire in Gaza. In a meeting on Monday, the Israeli Prime Minister signaled that a ceasefire deal that would free dozens of Israeli hostages from Gaza could be taking shape.
מן הטעם הפשוט שאנחנו מפעילים לחץ מאוד מאוד חזק על חמאס, ואנחנו רואים שינוי מסוים, ואני חושב שהשינוי הזה ילך ויגדל, ואנחנו מתכוונים לעשות את זה. זוהי מטרת מלחמה.
In light of his visit, demonstrators quickly took to the White House protesting Netanyahu's trip to the United States and taunted staff as they made their way to the entrance, criticizing Israel's actions during its war in Gaza. Netanyahu is scheduled to address the U.S. Congress on Wednesday. This will be the Israeli Prime Minister's fourth address to the Congress and the most ever by any other leader. His address will be made keeping in mind that Israel's ally, the United States, which provides both diplomatic and military support to Israel, is crucial to his political survival. Samia Afsar for NDTV World.
Taking a quick break for now, but after the break, we will tell you what Meta has in store for its allies, OpenAI and Google. Now, Meta has released a new artificial intelligence model. It says rivals technologies from OpenAI and Google and is making it free for anyone to use. Now, the new model called Llama 3.1 extends Meta's strategy of making its models open source, meaning anyone can use and modify them without paying the company. If Meta is successful, it could undermine the business models of its big tech rivals and make it easier for startups to compete against the likes of OpenAI while potentially giving fraudsters, state-sponsored hackers and other bad actors access to cutting-edge technology. Meta released the last version of its AI, Llama 3, just 3 months ago. Listen in.
Hey everyone, we got another big AI release today. First, Meta AI is on track to reach our goal of becoming the most used AI assistant in the world by the end of the year. There are hundreds of millions of people using it already, and we keep making it smarter and freely available in more countries. Today, we're upgrading Meta AI with our newest model, Llama 3.1, which will also be the first open source model at the frontier and among the most advanced out there. It's a really big improvement. Smarter, supports more languages, better reasoning, just better overall. I'm going to go deeper on Llama 3.1 in just a minute. But over the next couple of weeks, we're also adding a couple new features. Meta AI's Imagine feature that generates images fast as you type,